Good evening. I'm Sami Parvez and welcome to the Sami Parvez Show. Today I'm joined by Bryan who is the Toronto Sun national politics reporter. We will be discussing about Canadian political affairs as Justin Trudeau is facing mounting pressure to step down as the Liberal Party leader and the recent changes in Canada's immigration policies, and also we will discuss about the transparency in liberal government, and also we will discuss about the previous government and the future government, whether they would perform better in terms of transparency. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining me on the Sami Parvez show. It's great to have you again here.
Oh, happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. So let's talk about what's happening in Ottawa. Is Justin Trudeau facing lots of pressure to step down, but it seems like he's not going anywhere. And recently, I think today or yesterday, he told one of the local newspaper that he is going to lead Liberal Party in the next election. So how do you see, like, with respect to the revolt? We saw, like, I believe at least 30 MPs who said he needs to resign, but he's not going to anywhere. So how more reaction we would see from those 30 MPs? Maybe could be more than that. And so how Justin Trudeau would handle it uh, in future.
Yeah, this was kind of it's sort of the coup that wasn't. It kind of really it fizzled. Sorry, move my adjust my microphone here.
Yeah.
It fizzled before it even got off the ground. And the main reason for that is that there really isn't any. There wasn't really any commitment behind it. There's only three MPs that admitted to signing the letter. The rest of them are keeping silent because they it just proves that there wasn't really sort of a heart behind this. I guarantee even the true believers in the cabinet are terrified inside about what's going to happen. The Toronto St. Paul by-election proved that there's no safe seat in Canada for the Liberals right now.
Mhm.
So don't tell me that even Mark Miller or Anita Anand aren't looking at that, and looking at their own constituents going, are they going to reelect me? What's going on here? Am I going to end up with a job after, if the writ ever drops? So, that's foremost the mind of any politician, but particularly the Liberals right now. And to be totally honest, it's a little disappointing to see that, that there was this big movement, but no one's really willing to put their names to it because that's not a movement. That's just disgruntled employees. And that's just, a petition with no names, means nothing. And I was there. I was outside the caucus room
Yeah.
after that meeting. Afterwards, the prime minister strode out, smiled, everything's great, party's unified, and walked away. He's got no reason to worry. He's got no there's no real challenge to his power. The letter gave a deadline for Monday for him to step down or in order a leadership review. He's not going to do that. It's even before he said he wasn't going to during that press conference. Like anybody could reasonably assume that there's no way he's going to step down because there's no reason for him to step down
Mhm.
because he's got the support of his party ostensibly. I'm sure that's not really the case, but this coup fizzled to nothing, and he's as far as he's concerned, and as far as the party is concerned, he still has a mandate, and it's going to take
Mhm.
a lot more than just three brave MPs to put their names to this petition for him to get the message that he's poisoned for this party.
Mhm.
This whatever this next election is going to be. I'm sure it'll ask me, so I'll just tell you right now. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I think we're going to look at this government sticking on to the bitter end. Um, you know, there's an election that this party's going to be routed. You're going to end up with the bloc as the official opposition again. So I think it's a very weird time in Canadian politics right now.
Mhm. Yeah, and do you take Prime Minister Justin Trudeau words? The party is united behind him. Do
Oh,
you think it is?
Well, it's really impossible to say. There were MPs that signed this letter, not which means that there's MPs who are concerned enough to you know, maybe change their Facebook status or change their Facebook image to, one of our editors said it during a meeting earlier this week. It's slacktivism. It's exactly what it is. It's no different than changing your Facebook profile picture to, mark a cause or something. That's what we have here. We have politicians who aren't brave enough to go public and say, this is what needs to happen. So yeah, I'm sure the party isn't united behind him, but they're giving nobody a choice but to think that the party is united behind it. Because if there wasn't, I think there'd be a lot more robust efforts to put him aside than just, than sort of a lame petition that nobody wants to put their name to.
Hmm. Yeah, and we also saw like earlier this week, four MPs said they are not seeking re-election, and we also saw former Transport Minister Pablo, who is who is willing to run as a Quebec Liberal Party leader. So, do you think it is all because they know they may lose their seats, as you said, like, and we all know that. Losing in Toronto St. Paul's, then losing in Montreal. It means there is no seat, there is no safe seat for liberals anywhere else in this country.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You've got, I think we're going to see more. Like I said, Pablo Rodriguez left.
Yeah,
Sure, he
yeah.
was going for, didn't just leave and whatever. He's running for office in another area. But if he didn't think that there was a future with the party, he probably would have stuck around. You've got a
Mhm.
lot. You got Dan Vandal. He was a cabinet minister. He's gone. Carla Quattro.
Yeah.
She's gone. And we're talking OG liberals, liberals that have been in cabinet since 2015. And there's
Mhm.
other MPs that weren't in the cabinet who have announced that they're not going to be running again because they know that, there's a good chance that they're not going to win.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it must be a very, very scary time to be a liberal right now. It's
Mhm.
their party's sinking around them, and it just seems like the prime minister and his inner circle, or either they aren't aware. And I'm say whatever you want about Trudeau, he's not that dense. He can read the writing on the wall, or which I think is that he doesn't care. I think that the liberals have said it before. They think of it not as a problem with them. It's just that they're not doing a good enough job of explaining themselves. They're not doing a good enough job of explaining their policies. And that kind of arrogant view, I think, is shared by a lot of people in the PMO. Is that
Mhm.
it's just our problem. We're not understanding what the issue is. We're not understanding what they're trying to do. And as soon as they figure out how to explain it right, then we'll all get on side. They don't realize that it's 9 years is a long time for any government.
Yep. Yep.
I'm old enough to remember Brian Mulroney. I'm old enough to
Mhm.
remember Jean Chrétien, and then the Paul Martin, and then what happened after that. Suddenly you've got years of Stephen Harper, and then people get tired of him, and then they go to Trudeau. And now
Mhm.
people are tired of Trudeau, and it's most likely going to be Polyev. And Polyev's going to be in office for, probably 8, 9 years. People get tired of him, and it's going to
Mhm.
go back to whoever, you know,
From
maybe,
liberal.
Champagne is the Liberal Party leader by the time, people have their fill of Polyev. So, yeah, it's the vicious cycle of Canadian politics. It never changes, no matter who's in power or what's going on. We elect people in a landslide. We love them until we don't, and then we throw them to the curb.
Mhm. Yeah, it has been like this is just a cycle, like as you gave a brilliant example. But we so do we there are also some talks like maybe the big venture liberal MPs may vote uh, on no confidence motions. Do you think this would happen? And I also need to know, like, it seems like we see like prime minister says the party is united behind him, but like if we take a look in the history of like particularly conservative after Brian Mulroney, who lost. It mean who stepped down, then gave the elm to Campbell, if I'm correctly saying her name.
Jim Campbell, yeah.
Yeah. So she took the helm. Then they just the history we have, like she just won two seats. Like then we saw a power of a liberal government I think it was around 15 years, 13 to 15, I think. If I'm not wrong, until 2008, I think Harper took the uh, took the power, you know. No, pardon me. It was 2006. Yeah, it means at least like it means over 10 years. So can we see a movement like that if Trudeau does not step down and run until the next election?
Well, the thing is that I think he's definitely going to stick around. He has no choice. The thing is that he legitimately does not like Pierre Polyev. Has like he physically hates Polyev. And the only thing he hates more than Polyev is being, put over by Polyev. So the last thing he wants to meet him in battle. He wants to go mano a mano against him. He thinks he can win against Polyev, and he wants to try. He doesn't want to step down and let Anita Anand or Champagne or whomever. I would have said, if he hadn't stepped down, I would have said Pablo, whoever's the next liberal leader. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be Freeland. I think her aspirations go beyond. I think, she kind of has envisioning herself maybe a job in NATO
Mm,
after her stint with the Canadian government. That's just my opinion. But it's he doesn't want to speak. He doesn't want to step to the sidelines and watch Champagne lead the party and win or lose against Polyev. He wants to be the one to kick Polyev's ass because he hates him. There's the dislike between the men is so palpable. You know, despite what a lot of political hobbyists on Twitter think, there's a lot of friendship between the parties. I know a lot of liberal and conservative and NDP MPs who are friends outside of the house. They hang out. You see them around town, and they're legitimately friendly despite their different political views. I know that's hard to believe. That's so hard to believe in
yeah.
today's today's ideologically driven society where you're A or B, yes or no, red or blue, conservative, liberal, and if you believe in one thing, then fuck you and your beliefs kind of thing. But it's that just doesn't exist on the Hill. There's a lot of friendship between the parties, and there's a lot of respect and camaraderie, and a lot of what you see in question period and press conferences is show. But that's not the case with Trudeau and Polyev. I have no idea how Polyev feels about Trudeau personally, but yeah, Trudeau hates Polyev, and he wants to be the one to take him down. He wants to be the one to face him, and he's ultimately going to be the one who's going to lose to him. And I think he doesn't believe that. I think he believes that he's got a real fighting chance and that Canada's behind him. And, that's just the narcissism that comes with Justin Trudeau. He's got a long documented history of being a narcissist. He doesn't, he doesn't believe he's elected to lead. He believes he's anointed to lead.
Mhm.
He believes that it's his divine destiny to lead Canada towards, whatever beautiful future. And that's no bullshit. That's how he feels. That's how, that's how he sees himself in his job. He sees this as, you know, and I think that it's going to come as a real shock to him when he finds out that that isn't true and when the next election is. And I'm not being partisan. I'm just looking at the polls.
Yep.
You've seen the polls. Like, there's
Yep.
absolutely no way the liberals are going to win the next election.
Yep.
Unless like there's some sort of like a videotape of Pierre Poilievre murdering an old lady in the middle of Wellington Street or something, and it's broadcast live to the internet. It's support for Poilievre isn't going to wane anytime soon. So it's the liberals are dead men walking. They just don't realize it.
Hmm. Yeah, you get some best example. And but do you think like a liberal party would go back to like fourth status what we saw back in 2006, I think, when Harper took the helm, or uh, when a minority government.
It's really It's really hard to say. It's we the politics right now is just so it's so up in the air. Like it's so polarized right now. It's so like and it is and it isn't because like for example, you look at last the big news last week was the on Thursday the press conference the liberals had where they're cutting immigration numbers.
Hmm.
They're cutting immigration to the point where they want to slow population growth. Even 4 or 5 years ago, if you were to suggest, maybe it's time to slow down immigration, maybe it's time to slow population growth, you know, um, temporary workers and international students are causing real tangible problems in our communities, you'd be branded a racist, you know?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
now you've got Trudeau going on national television in front of all these reporters doing exactly what him and his and his ilk would have considered to be racist even 4 or 5 years ago. So, it's I think all that does is it proves how malleable the liberals' policies are right now. The biggest example of that was the carbon tax carve out. When they
Hmm.
decided to cut the carbon tax on home heating fuel, which was just a way, which it was a carve out, but it was a way to garner votes in Atlantic Canada. So, that shows that that it doesn't matter how they walk the walk. When a government's programs get that malleable, like I wouldn't be surprised in the next few months we see him ditch the carbon tax altogether. At what point, like how low do the polls have to get before the liberals start really hitting the panic button? Really doing like it's but this time next year, you might even see the liberals reversing the carbon tax to try to get
Hmm.
people off their backs. Like they're going to try to do anything to try to save votes and to try to save the election. But at this point, like how low does it have to be? How low is low? Can't get any lower than they are right now. They're all in a lot of polls they're polling third behind the NDP. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
do they have to get lower than the PPC for them to to act out? Like it's absolutely crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, and but do you? I need to ask you again the same question as I asked it before. Sorry about that. But do you think will there be another revolt? Like maybe some bank venture or set as an independent candidate, or they may make their own party. Are you hearing something like that, or do you predict something happen like that?
Create a party outside of
Party, yeah, yeah, outside of the liberal, like as Justin Trudeau is not going anywhere, and they are asking for him to step down. But
Mhm.
are they going to make another party?
I think anybody who wants to have a shot at forming another party just needs to look at Bernier and the PPC. It's gone nowhere. They get candidates and they poll, but PPC is never going to get enough support to elect an MP, much less form a government. No, I don't see that. I don't see them almost doing what the Reform Party did when with the Reform and the Progressive Conservative
Yeah.
split. I don't see like a schism like that happening. Um, I do see, and at the same time, I also don't see anybody crossing the floor. I don't think that anybody in the party, they see all the other ones as extreme opposites to what they are. The NDP see themselves as the anti, the anti-liberals, the anti-conservatives, the conservatives see themselves the anti-liberals, blah, 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 blah. So I think that I don't think you're going to see. I don't think you're going to see that. I think that politics stays the same. Politics changes a lot, but I think a lot of ways it stays the same. I don't think that I don't see I don't see Discord being that great. The liberal, I mean the PCs, the federal PCs and the Reform Party, they splinter for completely different reasons. Their support was great enough that both parties were actually able to form caucuses in the House of Commons. You know, I if it'll take more than just 30 disgruntled liberal MPs to form a new party, and even then, like the party needs to look at itself. They need to do a reset. They're leaning very, very hard left on a lot of issues. They're supposed to be the centrist, it's supposed to be like the voice of common sense between the NDP and the Conservatives, and
Mm.
you know that's just not you've got them trending ideologically so close to the NDP that that a lot of their policies intermesh. So yeah, I think that I think you're just going to see people quit politics before they start talking about forming another party.
Mhm. Yep. And but how do you see? Like we know, like Justin Trudeau is not going anywhere. Let's suppose tomorrow or on Monday, Justin Trudeau announced that he is going to step down, and somebody maybe they appoint an interim leader. So, do you think the numbers would change anytime until the next election? At least they can form a official opposition.
An interesting question because I think that when you look at these polls, like you spend a lot of time on Twitter, as do I,
Yeah, yeah.
and I know that kind of warps you into thinking that's how the rest of the world feels, how everybody on Twitter is just, the average Canadian is nothing like that. The average Canadian doesn't really, they might know Poilievre's name, they definitely know Trudeau's name, they might know Singh's name, they definitely don't know who the leader of the Bloc Québécois is or PPC or anything. Just normies, just normal people. They're the reason the liberals are polling low is because they're in government during hard times, and the policies are having a lot to do with that. I don't think this rabid hatred for Trudeau is not definitely not shared amongst rank and file average Canadians. So I think that if Trudeau were to announce Monday and step down and say Champagne becomes prime minister or liberal leader, um, it would. I don't think it would change much. I think maybe that maybe a bit of a balance, but I don't think that changing the leader will be enough to bring them back into contention against the Conservatives right now. I think that things are too bad. I think that whoever's in power right now is going to be suffering because people are suffering. Cost of living's never been higher. We have an affordability crisis. The healthcare, it's a provincial issue, but it still reflects on what's going on in the federal government. Immigration is a huge issue. I think that unless they elected somebody who immediately killed the carbon tax and killed a lot of the unpopular policies that the Trudeau government is known for. I don't think it's going to be enough. I think this party is a dead man walking. I think that there's nothing that the liberals can do that will save them right now.
Yep. And were you seeing the same thing back in 2015 when Harper was in power? What the situation right now for Justin Trudeau is?
In what way do you mean?
Like in the with respect to polls, like as Canadians were sick of Harper at that time too, like as now they are sick of Justin Trudeau is out there, they are calling him out, like what the situation like same or they were completely different? They just needed a change, like everything was normal at that time back in 2015.
Well, back in 2015, things weren't nearly as bad as they are now. You know, the defeat of Harper was not on the backdrop of everything that's happening now. You've got things are so bad right now. We've got scurvy making a comeback. There's so
Yeah,
many
yeah.
people that aren't able to feed themselves. People are losing their homes. You know, 2015 was nothing like that. Like back in 2015, I probably could have been able to afford a house.
Hmm. Yep.
No, I think that I think the fatigue factors into it. That Harper was in power a long time, and like I mentioned before, Canadians have about a decade limit that they like to
Hmm.
give governments before they boot them to the curb. So
Yep.
the world was in a lot different place in 2015. I think
Hmm.
that Harper didn't nearly have as many challenges that Trudeau had right now. And I think if things are good right now, if things were good right now, if we didn't have this inflation and affordability issue, if like a shitty little home wasn't $1 million, I think Trudeau would still be in trouble. I think that it's things in Canadian politics go in cycles.
Hmm. Yeah, and how do you see like Justin Trudeau's press conference on cutting the immigration numbers? And also, we saw on the Thanksgiving Day, RCMP did a press conference. Then, following time, like at around 3 p.m., then Justin Trudeau with public safety and foreign affairs minister, they did a press conference on India, like allegation against India, and expelled six diplomats. So was it a political move, or it was legit, or I would say they just did it to district people, like district Canadians, like what are the headlines right now? Trudeau is in trouble. We have this and that, so they just wanted to change the headline.
I guess I'm too cynical. I don't believe in the whole, conspiracy theory about distractions, about how, oh, some big crisis right now. Oh, it must be a distraction for something. People always say that kind of stuff, but that's just, that's schizophrenic nonsense. That's just bullshit. There's no,
Yep.
there's no, they aren't faking news just to distract people from their own poll numbers. I don't think it's big enough disaster for that. But it's I think in terms of what you brought up, I think that it proves that life goes on for governments. It doesn't matter if it's how bad you're polling, or there's still a job to do, and it's I certainly don't think that they're engineering like particularly since the stuff that they're supposed to be engineering does nothing but make the government look bad. I think that there was definitely a political strategy in lowering the immigration numbers. I think if the if their number if their approval ratings weren't so low right now, I think maybe they would have made that step. Because like I said before, that's such a drastic step backwards in their immigration policy for them
Mhm.
to like Pierre Poilievre hit it right on the head, during his press conference after the prime ministers, that it's a admission that their immigration policy has failed, and it has. When you look at the numbers, I've looked at some of these numbers and some of the stories I've written. Like the
Mhm.
amount of people that we let into Canada is just like astounding.
Yep.
Like there's no way that we'd be able to build that many homes or make that many rental units available to accommodate everybody. And no wonder, like I rent a house. Oh, hey, sorry, I'm busy right now. Sorry, my daughter.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry for that. It's okay.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Your viewers just heard the intrepid assistant. She was very when she was an infant during COVID, she was very instrumental in helping me work from home. But
Wow.
as I was saying, that I think that if they weren't polling as bad as they are right now, I don't think I think they definitely would not have changed their immigration policy as much as they did, because like I said, Polly hit the nail on his head. Hit the nail on the head. It's a admission of failure.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, everything is just like is in crisis. I myself has been unemployed like over 10 months. I know like many people are unemployed, and the
Mhm.
rent are too high. Like a few years ago we were just paying normal rent, but now everything is up, and the source, like the inflation and rise of cost is up.
Mhm.
And let's jump to another topic. So right now we are airing about green slush fund, and also recently Blake, like it mean I think I read it from Blake Locke's reporter, that they found the emails which were deleted. Now they found it for Arrive scheme, like the app, just which is for two people company. They received, I think, uh, it was $60 million, or maybe it could be more than that. So
Mhm.
what do we know more about that one, and where would it take it to the liberal government? And I also need to, I'm sorry, like I'm asking multiple questions, but is Justin Trudeau going to probe the parliament just because of this scandal to shut down all the committees to bring back with a new mandate?
Well, prorogation, that's always on the table. That's the secret weapon. It's a secret weapon that Harper used, that I remember that Trudeau was very, very critical of. Yeah, it's you know like Parliament's almost prorogued anyways, because you mentioned the Green Slush Fund.
Yeah.
And just for your listeners who aren't aware of what's going on, like there was the Tories had requested a bunch of documents, like hundreds of thousands of documents, related to it, and the Liberals would not provide all of the documents they asked for. Some of the documents were missing altogether. A lot of them were heavily redacted. So the Conservatives were like, you've been ordered to produce documents. Either give it to us or we're going to object. And the Speaker of the House, Greg Fergus, he was a Liberal MP. He sided with the Conservatives. Said, yeah, the Liberals are in contempt. They did not come through with the document order. So the Conservatives filed a notice of privilege, and until that gets resolved, that's pretty much the only order of business in the House right now. And it's been that for the past 2 weeks. If you look at the order paper, and the order paper is almost blank. It's nothing but it's almost like a filibuster. Until the Liberals can either get the majority of the House to agree to a motion to drop the questioning, or if the Liberals, you know, give the documents, this will all be over. But as it is right now, it doesn't look like either the Bloc or the NDP are interested in helping out. So, that's ground Parliament to a halt. They can't they can't vote on new bills. They can't advance anything new. They can't, do any new business until this privilege motion is off the floor. And it's yeah, so if there's a question if Trudeau's going to prorogue Parliament, might as well. It's not like anything's getting done anyways. So the that is, that could very well be be an escape hatch that he might use. The Bloc have given the Liberals an ultimatum. They have until I believe until Monday to I think it's 20th or 30th. I'm not one of those.
29th.
29th, that's it. Oh, just right in the middle, right there. Yeah, the
Yeah,
20,
yeah.
they got until the 29th to increase funding for seniors, or they will join forces with the Conservatives and try to bring the government down in a confidence motion.
Mhm.
I don't know if they have enough to do that with the NDP. I'd have to look at the numbers. I mean, top of my head, I don't know it, but you know, um, if it's looking like they're going to lose a confidence motion, I wouldn't be afraid. I wouldn't be surprised if Trudeau, pulled the cord and pro Parliament, because it's certainly within his power to do so, and it would halt anything that would collapse the government.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, but so this pro the government, this is I would say it is weird, like for a Western democracy. So at least like this parliamentarian system. So
Mhm.
they whenever the government is in trouble, the prime minister in trouble, so you need to probe the parliament. Like so
Mhm.
what we saw, I think it was happen in the UK too, when Boris Johnson was the prime minister. He was on a visit to Washington. Then he was called back. So I think in the middle of his trip, he went back there. At that time, I think Queen Elizabeth was alive. So it was a tricky situation at that time. Then I think Parliament got resumed there. But here in Canada, so we always see, like, as you mentioned, the Stephen Harper. I think Stephen Harper was the first prime minister in Canadian history, or his government was found in contempt of Parliament for proroguing the Parliament. Am I correct?
I I think so. I don't want to say 100%, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds like you're right. I'm not 100% sure though.
Yeah, and but they made this system, like, it means whenever they are in trouble, so they can rescue themselves. Yeah, like using this rule or and that rule. So how do you see? Is this how democracies work?
It's a cowardly thing to do. It's hitting the pause button. It's preventing, and if the prime minister does decide to do that to save his own neck, yeah, I think that a lot of people will look at that as a very cowardly move. It seems a bit of an undemocratic move, but at the same time, there's a lot of really weird things in Canada's government, like the amount of sheer power that the prime minister has. and especially when it comes to like appointing and things like that. These are powers that are very unique, even in the Westminster parliamentary system. Like, the Canadian Prime Minister has powers the UK Prime Minister doesn't have.
Mhm.
It's yeah, it's definitely a tool within his disposal. But I think that if he does do it, he's going to have a lot of people, even you know, people within his own party, accusing him of cowardice. But at the same time, it's like if it's the only thing that's going to save his neck, then there's a good chance he'll do it.
Mhm. Yeah, and you also, I think you tweeted about that one. National Security Department shared the document, or national security documents, which are regarding India interference in Canadian democracy, were shared to Washington Post.
Mhm.
I think you tweeted about that one. Is they don't share what you ask as a journalist, like, or a reporter to Canadian government. Um, it mean Canadian government, so they don't respond much to the media, but they share the secret documents to the other foreign national outlets. So how do you take that one?
Yeah, I would say it's so typical. It's so typical. Like it's so hard to get comment out of this government right now. Like, yeah, I'm not even talking like, don't even get me started on cabinet ministers. Like 9 times out of 10, whenever I email a cabinet minister for comment, my comment always gets bumped to the departments. Like, for example, story I worked on last week, I was trying to get some comment out of Minister Jolie's office. Um, but they bumped me to global affairs. It's because they don't want to have to deal with it. Meanwhile, my question was specifically towards the minister. Um, it's especially global affairs. It's so hard to get comment out of them. Like it was a couple weeks ago. It was a Monday. I emailed for comment for a story that I was writing for Wednesday. It was 2 days to get back from me. They never got back to me. So my story went to press on Wednesday. And on Friday, I get an email from them saying, "Hi, we're gonna need until Monday to get an answer." And I said, "Well, I just my story went to press on Wednesday. I don't, like in what possible world, is it acceptable for you to even, almost a week to get back to me?" But that's just the way political comms is in this country. And I don't even blame the comms people. I don't blame the flacks. I don't blame the people that communicate through email. What I blame is the bureaucracy around them. I guarantee it's you've got a lot of managers in the chain that want to be looped in, who want to have a say on it. I've worked in comms before. I know that it's so working in journalism as long as I have, it's frustrating how slow the whole bureaucracy works when it comes to like I get a tip for a story. I do a few interviews. I could have it online in an hour. In professional comms, it could take days for people to get approved even a single message. So it's it's I understand it's par for the course, but things are just broken in this country when it comes to political comms. I don't think it's going to change much in this next government because we're dealing with a bureaucracy, we're dealing with the public service. It's cabinet blacks will come and go. Like if the government changes, all the people that work for liberal cabinet ministers will be out of a job, and the conservatives will bring all their people in. But the people who actually work in the bureaucracy, the people who do comms for GAC, if you do comms for IRCC or CBSA or finance department, they all stay the same because they're not
Mhm.
political. So it's a big problem in Canada's public service. There's a lot of apathy. There's a lot of a lot of entitlement and a lot of attitudes out there that they don't have to work hard and that they don't have to and I think that's reflected in the service that we get. When was the last time you tried to get a passport in this country or get a birth certificate or get you get an ATIP process? Like it takes years to get ATIP requests back.
Yep, yep.
And the same thing goes for the people whose job it is to deal with the media. It's embarrassing. Like the worst is the RCMP. Like RCMP flacks are the worst. And I once I typically get no response from Flax when I contact them. So if they never respond to me, I never think of it. But I sent a request to the RCMP, and it took them, I think it was almost 8 months for them to reply to my inquiry, just to say that they weren't willing to do it. So it's just par for the course. It's a terrible situation, and changing government will not fix that at all.
Yep. So could you please a little bit explain so how it works? So directly like let's say Justin Trudeau is the prime minister. So is a spokesperson won't going to write it, send back the email to you? It would process from. It is a different process. It would be reviewed some other people the message particularly. So they want to know how to comment on it.
Well, the way it works is that like when you contact like if you want to contact a cabinet minister, like for example, say I'm doing a story and I want to get comment from Anita Anand. So what I would do is I like she would have a press secretary, so I'd contact her. Um, and each cabinet minister has their own press secretary, or
Yep, yep,
sometimes if it's a big enough, they might have a couple of people on staff. The PMO has a few staff people, like there's a gentleman named Mohammed Hussein. He's the main contact for press for the PMO, and he's usually pretty responsive. He gets back to me pretty quick, and I see him in the halls at Parliament. I say hello. In fact, that tweet I made about Andrew Scheer with the 2-4 of beer. He was in the I was in the elevator with Mohammed and Andrew Scheer walked in with a beer. So yeah, when it comes to the departments though, it's a bit different because there's a lot more people. Like for example, if I contact Global Affairs Canada, I send it to an email address, and there's probably that email will probably go to 120 people, and I guess someone gets assigned to it, and it's up to them to deal with it, whatever. So yeah, when you're dealing with the cabinet ministers, it's a lot more one-on-one. But when you're dealing with the departments, it's anybody's guess. You're pretty much thrown to the wind, and they may decide. And it's a lot easier for them to ignore your request because it's not like there's just one person. Like by email, if I email like Champagne's press flack, and he doesn't get back to me, like I got his number, I'll text him and say, "What the hell? You're not getting back to me." But if it's an apartment, it's like there's no one there's no one I can text because there's 1 of 20 people there who
yep.
who have made the decision not to get back to me. So yeah, it's a mess. It's so hard. It's so difficult getting stories out of especially when you work for a newspaper. Like things are better now that I'm at the Sun, but like when I was at the National Post, our press deadline was 3 p.m.
Wow.
Like that's really early. So it's, like at the Sun, like like Toronto Sun has two editions. Our two deadlines are like 9:30 and 10:45. They run the press for a bit and then we do a replate. So if there's breaking news, we can get into the late edition. So that leaves a lot of flexibility for us because, I don't work. I usually start my work at maybe like 7 in the morning and I'm usually on about 2 or 3. But I have that flexibility. So they're able to get back to me. Hey, we can't get back to you till 5. Anybody getting back to you for 2 p.m. or for 3 p.m. or because I get back for 2 p.m. because I got to write the story. That's really, really, that's one thing I don't like about, that's one thing I didn't like about working at the National Post was having those early deadlines because it's impossible for a lot of departments to get back to, especially when it comes to the Canadian government politician or the even Canadian government departments because they never get back to you anyways. And if they do, it's not going to be delayed. They're not going to get back to you quick. So that's just a little inside baseball behind the scenes thing. But I'm glad to be back in the Sun when it comes to, I don't have a 2 p.m. deadline for everything.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and could you please share your story regarding New Zealand? I think you contacted New Zealand Global Affairs, something like back in I think few years ago, and you said that they also contacted you back that
Oh,
everything is okay with you.
no, that was the White House.
Why down? Okay.
Yeah, when I was still with the National Post, I was doing a story and I think it was the State Department. It wasn't the White House, it was the State Department. And like I'm used to global affairs where it takes them like bloody forever to get back to me, but not like I emailed them at like 9 o'clock in the morning. Not only did I have a reply by 10, she called me back at 2:30 to ask me if there was anything else I needed. and that's just kind of that's the kind of white glove service you don't get with Canadian politics. Like there's no way a Canadian department's going to, call me back at 2:30 to make sure I got everything I needed. But meanwhile, the US State Department, that's just how they do, that's how they roll. Like I used to cover crime earlier in my career, and getting anything out of Canadian police departments is impossible to get, this with the privacy and just their unwillingness to deal with. But meanwhile, like I talk to my friends in the States who cover crime, and it's easy. Like they can, and I've called up, American police departments for stories, and they're like, yeah, okay, give me your email address. I'll send you the body cam video. I'll send you the 911 calls. I'll send you like records. It's amazing the stuff that you can get in the States with just a phone call. And this is the land of the free, the home of the brave, constitutional rights, blah blah blah. Americans, America Eagle, all that stuff. But it's just so easy to get stuff. Like such the police departments. Like I did a story a couple of years ago. I had a call. I think some police somewhere in Colorado. It wasn't a big city. It was a smaller city, and the guy was emailing me 911 calls. Like here, I'll email you. Here's the call. Just don't broadcast them. But here you go. And it's just like I can't imagine that any situation in Canada where they would give you access to the recordings of a 911 call, much as
Mhm.
body cam video. Like my wife and I love watching the body cam videos on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, there's no way that any Canadian police department would release body camera videos to the media. So yeah, it's such a bizarre difference between the two countries, and it's just something that Canadian media and the Canadian public have grown accustomed to, is the fact that you know it was one of the big failures of Trudeau's administration was, he was elected under a promise of open by default government, reforms to the ATIP laws and transparency. And meanwhile, it was, I think it might have been Vice a couple of years ago. I can't remember who. They decided to do a story on the reforms to Canada's access to information program, and so they filed an ATIP. And the ATIP came back. It was like 500 pages of blacked out, so it was like we live in a country where the legislation and the draft policy to make Canada a more free, open, and transparent government is censored like it's a top secret document. And that's just how Canada is. That's the Canadian way.
Who is responsible for this?
Ultimately, the prime minister, he's the one who sets policy. He's the one who, they send out mandate letters to all of the cabinet ministers when they start their jobs, and like, and in a lot of cases, federal governments, all these mandate letters are public, they're public domain. So they're marching orders from the prime minister to each of his cabinet ministers of the priorities he would like to see them accomplished, and those are the benchmarks that cabinet ministers are judged on by the PMO. And so it's up to the prime minister to set the priorities for his government. And if he truly wanted a transparent by default government to be a priority, that would have been spelled out in the letter, and he would have followed up on it, and we wouldn't end up in a situation where we can't even read the legislation to make the government more transparent and more accountable. You know,
Mhm.
that's the situation that we're in
Mhm. Yeah, and just last question. Sorry, I'm taking too much time.
right
Uh,
now.
so, uh, uh, so did we have the same thing during our era? And do you predict we would have the same thing, or better thing, or worst in Pierre Poilievre's government with respect to transparency?
Well, that was one of the big criticisms of the Harper government, was how tight of a rein he had on cabinet. Um, but I think if you look how things are now, I don't think things are any better with the Liberal Party. Prime Minister has a long history of throwing anybody who runs afoul of him under the bus. Just look at Jody Wilson-Raybould. Look at Jane Philpott. Like, if you become inconvenient to the prime minister, your days are numbered in this city. If you're a fly in the ointment, if you dare step out, and like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, when it comes to the MPs that aren't willing to sign the letter, because the prime minister will use that against them. Like he's not going to kick them out. He don't necessarily boot you out of caucus, but when the time comes for the nomination race in your riding, and suddenly you're left off the nomination list, you know, or you're asked to retire,
Mhm.
or you're suddenly shuffled out of cabinet. There's been a lot of cabinet ministers that have gone from permanent from I can't talk today. I apologize. From prominent places in his government. Not mentioning any names, Bardish Chagger, who ends up as a prominent figure of the cabinet to a backbencher. You know, like you know, Prime Minister, whether it's Harper and Trudeau's proved himself, he's no different. If you're inconvenient to the Prime Minister in the city, you're dead man.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. It is always a pleasure to have you here, and hopefully looking forward to having you again, maybe near time.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm always happy to.
Okay, my pleasure.